Hey, welcome to Dakari's sixth Dakari live session, which is also going to be available on demand. Tonight we have Bob Toth, and Bob is a veteran fire investigator. He publicly served with the fire department for several years. He currently owns a company called Iris Fire Investigations based in Colorado. Not only is Bob a private fire investigator, he also served with inside law enforcement and the fire service as well. He has instructed all over the world, including Hong Kong, Canada, Malaysia, Botswana, and South Africa. Not only is he the owner of Iris Fire Investigations, he is also the first vice president for the International Association of Arson Investigators, as well as the past president of the Colorado chapter of the IAAI. So without any further ado, Bob, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Bill. I'll get my screen up here. All right. Can everyone see the screen then? Shake of the head or a thumbs up?
You look good.
Okay, good. First of all, I'd like to thank Bill and Dakari for the invitation. This is quite the pleasure, and I'm glad I can be here. Good afternoon to everyone. Good evening to those a little bit more east of me. And if you're even further than that, good morning. But I've been probably teaching this report writing class in some way, shape, or form for probably the last 6 or 7 years. 1 year in Mississippi, we taught a class on report writing over 4 days. I've done it in as short as 4 hours, and the challenge for me was to compress this into 1 hour for this presentation today. So I've taken a lot of the background information out of here, and what I will be talking about today are some of the best practices, or at least what's recognized as some of the best practices in report writing, and what we refer to as Rule 26 reports. Like Bill said, I got 20 years in the public side. The last 10 also included law enforcement training as well. And then the last 18 years, I've been conducting private investigations. Let me see if this will work here. There we go. I always like to start off my presentations with this little quote from our buddy Albert Einstein: "And education is not the learning of facts, but the training of your mind to think." So as we go through this presentation, if you sit there and take notes and write down what you see in the presentation, you're doing well. To do even better, though, is to start thinking about these things. What I hope to accomplish at the end of this presentation is not give you the silver bullet and the panacea of the perfect report. Quite frankly, there is no perfect report. Wonder what happened there. And let's see here. How did I get all that scratches on? Anyways, there is no perfect report, and so that's not going to happen. But what I hope to happen at the end of this is that as you look at your reports, or perhaps at the end of this presentation, you look forward to maybe doing your next report. I mean, it's always interesting to me as I put on this presentation how many people are interested in report writing and are hungry for that information, when in fact I've always thought that that's the reason we got into fire investigations, is to write all those reports. Isn't that why most of us got into it? And I didn't think so. But so think about this stuff, think about your own reports, and if you can walk away with a few good nuggets on how to improve your product at the end, we'll all be better for it. Much of what I will be speaking about today came out of this book, How to Write an Expert Witness Report. As I was coming out of the public sector and starting to experience the private sector working for an engineering firm, I was contacted by a rather reputable fire investigation firm that works regionally. in the U.S., and they asked me if I would be interested in doing some work for them. I was thankful that they called me. I was surprised that they called me, and they said, "Yeah, we've seen, we know that you've been retired, and we'd like to see if you'd like to work with us. Just send us some examples of your reports." So being new to the industry, I sent them some of my redacted reports that I wrote when I was in the fire service and law enforcement. And about a month later, I contacted them and made sure that they got my reports. And they says, "Oh, yeah, we got them, but we're not going to hire you." He says, and I was a bit surprised. I asked, "Why is that?" And they said, "Because you write too, quote, damn much." And I thought that was interesting, the difference between what the public sector writes and what's typically wanted on the private side. So I went in search of what is an expert report, and I knew I would not get very good information from people that ultimately would be my competitors in the private sector. So I thought my next best thing would go to people that would likely beat me about the head and shoulders when I present my report in court, and who better to do that than attorneys. So these gentlemen right here, James Mangraviti and Stephen Babitsky, they wrote How to Write an Expert Witness Report, and the website that's down there in the lower right-hand corner. It's a very good book, very illustrative, and it gives many examples of expert reports. It even has some fire investigation reports in it, but even going beyond that, they also have some courtroom transcripts and deposition transcripts of experts testifying on their reports, where they made errors in the reports and how it affected their deposition or their testimony, and in some cases how they were able to rehabilitate themselves when some of the weaknesses in the reports were exposed. So that could be a good research or a good resource for you going forward if you want to look at something like this. They also have a host of other books. And if you go to their website, there's a number of free downloadable white papers about writing your report, testifying, deposition prep, and things like that. So for experts, as we all are moving forward and anticipating depositions or courtroom testimony in the future, this could be a good resource for you. I wish someone would have told me this while I was still in the public sector. And looking at the participant list earlier, just before we started, I would say the vast majority of people listening in today are public sector fire investigators, law enforcement, state, local, or federal, and or a fire service. And I can tell you from experience that if any of you, and I would venture a guess that a good percentage of you may have goals of taking your public sector fire investigation career and eventually riding off into the sunset and in retirement and then going into the private sector. I can tell you right now that as a public sector investigator, your interaction with insurance companies, adjusters, private investigators, and attorneys on the insurance and civil side of these fire investigations are being vetted and they're being evaluated, as is your fire investigation reports that you produce as a public servant. Shortly after I retired, thinking that I was going to go to work for an engineering firm, they quite honestly made me an offer I could refuse, and at the encouragement of my family, they talked me into starting my own business. And after 20 years of being fat, dumb, and happy on a lazy boy, I didn't think I would have the enthusiasm to go into business for myself. But as it turns out, with their support, I was able to do that. And I found out that shortly after word got out that I had retired from public service, I probably had close to 4 to 5 insurance companies call me, congratulate me on my retirement, and they said, "We want you to send us your CV. We want to start sending you work." And I asked all of them, I says, "How did you find me?" They says, "Well, we've been working with you, or we've been watching you as as you worked in the fire service, and we've always enjoyed working with you, and we've always enjoyed the work you did in the fire department, and we think we could use on the private side. So the moral of that story is you are being watched. If you have any aspirations or intentions of retiring from the public service and going into private industry, just bear that in mind. People who may hire you in the future could be watching and vetting you as we speak, because long after the fire's out, long after the building's been torn down and the building rebuilt, the only thing that really stands as a testament to your fire investigation is your report. And how that looks and how that reads says a lot about the person who developed that. So with that in mind, I want to show you one of the reports that I was asked to review, probably 10 or 12 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the formatting of your report. As I said, what I'm talking about are some of the best practices. And I know best practices can be subjective, but I can tell you right now there's two pieces of research that I'm aware of that speak to documents built in all caps. That research says that when the end user is reading a document written in all caps, their reading has to slow down by 40%. This is one of 27 pages of a fire department report that I had to review for a public defender for a guy he was representing in an arson case. 27 pages of this text. It was a 3-day fire scene investigation, and I knew that because there were 3 paragraphs in this report. It slowed me down by 40%, and it was physically painful. It gave me a headache. But all that being said, the content and the information was there, but it didn't speak very well to the polish, if you will, of the investigation. The other research that speaks to all caps like this is when they provided test subjects with documents written in all caps, and then they went back and interviewed them after they read those documents. The research shows that the end user or the reader of that document, they perceive the author or the producer of that document less intelligent than they are. And if you think about that, we've always laughed about or made jokes about people that were not intelligent enough to get out of jury duty. First of all, don't sell them short. But if you remember people talking about jurors who aren't smart enough to get out of jury duty, if they're reading documents like that, and the research shows that those people think you less intelligent than they are, that could be a big hurdle to come over, to get over in the future. So just something to think about. All right, some of the things we're going to talk about as we go through here: developing a template, topic headings. These are some things we'll get through in this presentation. We'll also talk about, we're not getting, there we go. Talk about table of contents, proper font size. There's actually some best practices on what size font to use, what type of font to use, headers and footers, and 1.5 spacing. Don't use single spacing or double spacing, but 1.5 is what is best recommended. Tables, appendices, all of these things. All of this refers back to what's called a Rule 26 report. And those are federal rules that identify and show the requirements of what a report needs in order for the author of that report to be admitted as an expert. I would suggest that you take the time to develop a template. It can be formatted in many different ways. As I said when I started, there's no perfect report. So let that format reflect well on you as a professional, polished investigator, and speak to your credibility and expertise as it sits there on that conference table in front of perhaps a jury that's deliberating the case, because your report is a key deliverable, and it's really worth your investment of time to put together a polished report. We'll show you some examples, time permitting. When I first started looking for professional expert reports, I would search the internet. You can do that now today and find a host of different resources for reports. and get some good ideas on layout, formatting, things like that. Topic headings, or what's called caption-based reporting, is typically what we see nowadays. Those of you that aren't familiar with it, again, we'll show you some examples. They break things up and make it easier to read and locate information. And as I said earlier, there are a host of formatting options you can use. And nowadays, it's very, very simple to insert colors. So don't hesitate to use that. Here's some examples. This is actually a report I did on a fire that's 20 years old now, but the report was completed 6 years ago. So 4 years after the fire, I have to generate a report. In fact, it was almost 4 years to the date of loss as I look at the dates on here of this fire that I had to write this report. But in this particular case, you can see the header at the top. Let's see if this will work. Yeah, you can see the header at the top. You can see I've put a little bit of color to separate the different sections. This is just a personal background and qualifications of the investigators. I start with a disclosure that talks about how this report was written in accordance with federal rules. But you can see just enough splash of color, a good header with the company logo on it to put a little bit of polish on it. I could have taken that same document I showed you in the beginning with all caps, change some formatting but not change the content of that report, and just by polishing a little bit, give it a much more professional look. One of the first places that I went, and I suggest you go there as well, and I'll show you that website again here at the end of the presentation, is the Chemical Safety Board. They have a host of different investigations that are currently ongoing and investigations that are finished, and you can download those investigations. Now, I'm not asking you or thinking that you should download them to read them for the entertainment value or the content of it, but look to see how they're laid out. Look how they, and read how they describe certain things and how they articulate their findings and how it's all put together. And there are some great ideas. There's, in fact, there's a couple of reports there that I'll admit it here. I admit it in all my presentations. I've stolen ideas from them because they are the federal government. They're here to help, and they helped me develop some cover pages as well. So we'll visit that site later on, time permitting. But this, again, is one of the cover sheets that I use. It's similar to what I use. This, again, this is my old company logo. You can see this report was written back in October of 2014, so it's almost 6 years old. But this layout with the photograph and the way it's all formatted is very similar to cover pages that I've seen on some CSB investigations. And it's like golfers say, it just fits my eye. I like the way it looks, and I've been using it now for a good 10 plus years. The book that I showed you earlier, this is an example out of the book. This is just another cover sheet for the reports. Again, it's all personal preference, but it's worth the time to develop your own personal template. Color is always good to splash into your reports. A color logo on the cover page and headers, again, with the word processing and computers that we all work with now. This is a no-brainer. It's simple, and I don't know about most of you, but I can't remember the last time I had to print up a report. All of my reports now are PDFs, and I ship them out electronically. And I'm very liberal with the color, just to put that professional polish on it. This is no longer an issue that it was when digital photography come out, but I just like this illustration here because you can see Oprah there on the TV guide. She was very offended when this photograph came out because that's not her body. And the body that Oprah's head is sitting on, the owner of that body was not very happy either. And you'll be able to see here shortly. Oprah and Anne Margaret were very upset that TV guide took liberties with that photo and Oprah, and they issued a formal apology and probably some cash. But I should say it should be of no surprise. We shouldn't alter or edit our photographs. And if there are any alterations or edits, save the original in case anyone wants to look at that. Table of contents are very easy to generate. I learned how to generate those by when I use Microsoft Word, I go to the help section, I go to table of contents or search table of contents, or go to Google, and it'll automatically generate your table of contents for you if it's set up properly. It looks polished, it looks professional, it can assist the reader, can assist the author, and in fact, if you can set them up properly and with a few more clicks of a mouse, if you've got a long report, you can go to your table of contents, click on wherever you want to go, and it'll take you to that section in the page. This is a table of contents of one of our Rule 26 reports, and this is automatically generated in Microsoft Word. And then if I go back into the report and I make any changes and it changes the pages, or I add new sections in here, I come back to the table of contents, I do a right mouse click, I say update the table of contents, and it automatically updates it for me. I don't have to worry about it. I just a little close-up photograph of the table of contents, and it will automatically update every time you change the document. Another example out of the book, another way to put together your table of contents. It's all personal preference and personal taste. An executive summary is a real good thing to have in your report. We talk a lot about in this presentation how we're producing these Rule 26 reports, but that also goes well for what I call my summary of findings as well. A lot of times we'll go out and do fire investigations that don't warrant. In fact, most times we go out and do fire investigations that don't warrant a Rule 26 report, yet our client wants some sort of document. So we create what we call our summary of findings, and we give the client 3 or 4 ways of being able to go through that report, finding the information they need to make the proper decisions on their claims processing. But the executive summary is right up front. It tells the reader basically what you're going to tell them and gives them the Reader's Digest version of the investigation. This is pretty much what we have on our summary of findings. This is our executive summary. This is an old one, probably for the last 5 years. We have not been using cause classification. And if some of you may already know, the classification chapter of 921 in the next edition has been removed. We haven't been classifying causes for quite some time. We just put together the ignition scenario and let other stakeholders in the investigation decide whether or not it's accidental or incendiary or unresolved. We don't use the term undetermined anymore. We prefer unresolved. Now, fonts, there's actually a few federal judges that have issued instructions on how attorneys are supposed to submit their documents, their paperwork, their reports, and things like that. Some of the suggestions and what's preferable is at least a 12-point font, because the smaller fonts are very difficult to read. They also suggest that you use a serif font. Serif fonts are those fonts that have like the little feet on the bottom of, for instance, let's say the P in reports here. Here's the difference. The font down below is a serif font. So if you see the word, let's take it, the first word in the paragraph, you can see that the capital I in both ones. The lower one is a serif font. It has little feet on there. That's a more professional font. The most common font used around today is a Times New Roman. I don't like using that one for no other reasons, because everyone uses that one. I use a font called Book Antiqua. It's a serif font. It just fits my eye. I like it much better. And they also suggest that you use 12 points, 12-point font rather than anything smaller like an 8 or a 10, something like that. They also suggest the best practice is to use a 1.5 spacing. It allows for an easier read, and if you have to, or during a technical review, or someone going over your report needs to make any notes, it's easy to do on that. This font right here is called a Comic Sans. It's essentially the font that they use to write the text in comic books. And there was actually a firm in this area years ago that used this in writing their reports. Now, it certainly stood out. You could certainly look across the conference table and know what company wrote those reports based on their font. But I don't know if it creates much of a professional image. I'm happy to say that it's long since changed, but that was very interesting years ago when they're using what's called a Comic Sans report to write the report. You want the serif fonts. You want a nice polished looking font. Headers and footers, those are very important in your document as well. Here's an example of one of our earlier headers. It's got the loss, the claim number, date of loss, things of that nature, your pages number, and a nice logo. And the other thing about that too, we have the blue line that separates the header from the text of the document. The footer is where I like to put definitions that I may put in the report. And a table of, I like to use tables too when I go down the timeline of events. I'll show you some of these examples too at the end of this. Your appendices and exhibits include your CV, photographs, and there are some federal rules as to what should be in your CV as well to allow you to testify as an expert. I also like to separate out and highlight my opinions. This is deeper into my report, where in the beginning of the report I list all my opinions, and now deeper into the report I'm relisting those opinions. I like to put a box around it, and then underneath that is all the basis for that opinion. My opinions and conclusions. This is another option. I'm still on the fence about this, about line numbering. I don't like, currently it doesn't fit my eye. Some people like line numbering. It's easier to find things, or when you're referring to page 2 of 6, line number 11, whatever the case may be. Some people like it. It's an option you can use. Again, it's personal preference. But like I said in the beginning, there are no perfect reports. You are not going to produce a report, lay it on the opposing counsel's desk. He's going to read it. He's going to fall to the floor, cry, and say, my client did it. It's not going to happen that way. There are no perfect reports, but a good report can prepare you for some robust cross-examination that you can expect to get. After all, the opposing counsel has a job to do it. In our the way our judicial system is set up, it is an antagonistic type of system where the other side is going to test your mettle. And if you've prepared a good report and it's a polished report and you've done some things to prepare for it, like getting your report technically reviewed, reviewing your report before you go to deposition, and know it like the back of your hand, you're going to do very well. So with that, I just want to show you this. Opposing counsel has a job to do. No matter how good your report is, he's got a job to do, and he's probably going to do it. So as the dog says here, I'm sure you're probably who you say you are, but regulations are going to require me to sniff your butt. The other side has got a job to do, and they're going to sniff your butt, but a good report will diminish the discomfort a bit. Let's go to a few techniques you can use to make your reports more powerful, understandable, and persuasive. No guessing, ever. Choose your words very carefully. At the end of this, in your next report, don't focus too much on the content as much as I would like to see you focus on the words you choose to use to describe the investigation and your findings. Words are important, and the attorneys hang on every word. I was in a, we'll call it a discussion for about 20 minutes because the opposing attorney accused me of moving the area of, moving a piece of evidence from the area of origin. And on the first page, I said appliance X was in the area of origin. On page 7, I said appliance X was at the area of origin. And we kept going back and forth saying, well, why did you move it? And I suddenly realized that he was arguing the difference between in the area of origin and at the area of origin. The difference was simply in and at, but for 20 minutes, he argued that. And when I finally figured it out, I was able to diminish the discomfort, and we went on to something more important. But words are very, very important. Follow a reliable methodology. You can't go to a fire investigation class. You can't sit in on a seminar. You can't sit in on any talk about fire investigations when they don't say scientific method or a systematic methodology. And I've always wondered why most reports that I've read do not reflect the scientific method. Because in the scientific method, it says you develop hypotheses, plural, and you test those hypotheses. And where the data is inconsistent, those hypotheses are eliminated. Well, in my Rule 26 reports, I have a section called Investigative Considerations, and I introduce it as here are some of the hypotheses or working hypotheses that were developed during the investigation, and where appropriate, how we were able to eliminate those hypotheses as causes for the fire. And I will list them out, and I will also list out the data we used to generate those hypotheses, and then I'll also talk about how we were able to eliminate those hypotheses. So the report itself starts to reflect the scientific method. Here's the data we collected. Here are the working hypotheses that were developed with the data as we were collecting it. And then when we analyze that data and we test that data, here's how we were eliminating these particular working hypotheses, leaving us only one hypothesis that was uniquely consistent with the data. And uniquely consistent with the data is verbiage right out of 921. Using absolute words. Avoid vague, equivocal. Equivocal terms are open to more than one interpretation. They're ambiguous, uncertain conclusions, and we'll talk a little bit about that here. And using absolute words. It's suggested that to show confidence and commitment to a statement, a person uses the active voice and speaks in first person singular. Now, I know some agencies and some departments require writing in third person. This officer responded to such and such a scene. This officer observed this. Well, more and more we're finding that the recommended best practice is to speak in first person singular. And to show commitment to the scene, if anyone has ever taken any content analysis, when you look at the words people choose to use, commitment to the statement and commitment to the story is usually represented in speaking in first person singular past tense. So I responded to the scene. I saw this. I did this. Use some confident language. Again, we'll show you some examples. We'll talk about hedge words and how to use definitions, objective language, subjective characterizations. Again, we'll touch on all of these in the closing part of this. I'm not going to read all of this. I just want to read the first line here. It says, I suspect the ignition source was a kitchen match. Words like this have really painted the investigator in the corner. First of all, he suspects that it was the ignition source. Doesn't have a lot of confidence in that. And then he limits his ignition source to a wooden kitchen match. That could create a very long, uncomfortable day during cross-examination. How about if we changed it to, based on the damage assessment, the area of origin, pattern analysis, and fire dynamics, the ignition source, uniquely consistent with the data, can only be the application of an open flame from a tool, such as a match, lighter, or other open flame device. Because if you write in your report that I suspected it was a wooden kitchen match, the defendant or the suspect who started the fire could go to his grave saying, I didn't start that fire. I didn't, and he'd be telling the absolute truth because he used a Bic lighter. So, it seems silly, but when you look at the words you choose to use, and then you look at the response from someone like a defendant, he was absolutely telling the truth. I did not start that fire with a kitchen match. He didn't say he didn't start the fire. He's just using your own words. Don't guess. Based on the pattern analysis, I believe the origin of the fire was in the kitchen. It doesn't matter what you believe. We need to know based on facts and data, not a fertile imagination. This is just some examples out of the book that shows how that cross-examination based on that type of language can create a problem. If you want some of these slides, please contact me and I'll get them to you. Bill asked me if I would produce some of the reports and provide some of the reports that I'm going to show you to the group. And I said I'd be more than happy to give any of these to any of the investigators that contact me personally. I don't want to just create a whole data dump for everyone if you're not going to want them. If you want them, I'm happy to share them with you. Just contact me offline and I'll get you whatever I need. So when we look at this based on pattern analysis, I believe the origin of the fire was in the kitchen. How about based on witness statements? My scene investigation analysis, I identify the area of origin within the northeast corner of the kitchen. Much more commitment to the statement, first person singular, and it gives you a much more confident language. Be extremely cautious about using absolute words like always and never. I've seen this on reports before. The investigator that showed me his report, great guy, love the guy. He goes through room by room by room, and after he does his inspection of each room, he writes, after a complete and thorough inspection of the structure or of the master bedroom, I was able to eliminate that as the area of origin. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is no one alive today or past or present that can do a complete and thorough inspection, because all the other side has to do is find one photo that you didn't take, one measurement that you didn't take, or one piece of evidence that you didn't think was important. And suddenly your investigation is not complete or thorough. So investigator, are you lying in your report or are you lying to the jury right now? You can see how some of this pompous language up front, like using a complete and thorough inspection of the structure, can turn around and bite you in the future. Words are important. And that's absolute words like that make it easy for opposing counsel to start making you look anything but professional. So less absolute language is easier to defend. Avoid vague and equivocal, uncertain conclusion. Those are things like using hedge words such as it seems or apparently or I think this is what happened. Those types of words don't exude confidence in your testimony any more than it does in your report. Don't use emphasis. I remember when I was doing reports for law enforcement, the only time I used emphasis is every time I introduced a new subject into my report, like another interview or another person I talked to, I would bold their names just so I could find it very easy in the report. But you don't want to use that type of evidence in your report. I saw one report underlined, the evidence clearly states that this is an arson, and he had it underlined with exclamation points and stuff like that. You don't need that. Your investigation should speak for itself. And that quote on the bottom, that was actually one of the comments made by the opposing expert in one of my investigations. He says his investigation, referring to me as the poster child for junk science, and quite honestly, I took offense to that. And the short story there is I wrote my rebuttal report to his report, and shortly thereafter, his client decided to drop the bad faith claim if we agreed not to share our investigation with law enforcement. That was a negotiation, but apparently the other side didn't understand arson immunity laws. Avoid the passive voice. Passive voice is awkward. Things like this method was used to evaluate the investigation of this case. Use the active voice. Use your voice. This is what I did. In this report, I compared the investigation of this case to the recognized principles. I also compared the conduct of the investigators, et cetera, et cetera. Using an active voice is much stronger and gives you a much better stance, if you will. I see this all the time in reports. It was noted that the windows on the south side of the structure were broken. Again, passive language. No, it's simple. I observed the windows on the south side of the structure were broken. And there's a website I'll show you that really picks up a lot. If you upload your reports, it will do a grammar and spell check for you and look for things like that. Use precise language. Don't be too vague in, like, for instance, the review of fire investigation literature, things of that nature. Be very specific when drafting your report. We talked a little bit about first person singular. Robert Toth examined the scene on. That's third person. I'm talking about myself or this investigator. It just all seems kind of clunky. Like, we examined the scene. They call that the royal we. If you don't identify who that we is, it just sounds awkward. And it's a needless distraction. It's simple. Just say, I examined the scene on. Here are some hedge words to try and avoid. It is possible, or it could have caused. It is plausible that. Plausible is an interesting term, and the definition of plausible in the dictionary that's recognized by 921 is an interesting definition, and you can. Because I see that a lot on opposing experts' reports. They talk about a plausible hypothesis, but if you look up the definition of plausible in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it usually says it's a statement that basically sounds true, but it's usually specious or false. So I like it when the other side says they have a plausible explanation. All of these are hedge words that you want to try to avoid, especially when you're speaking to your opinions. Suggest is another big one. The term suggest is a red flag to counsel that there may be different interpretations. So this pattern suggests the fire moved from right to left. You can darn well bet that your pattern and the suggestion you have is counter to what the other side says. So again, that's just one simple word, but they will latch onto that thing and make it very uncomfortable as you're testifying. Definitions. I like to put the definitions for technical terms or any type of jargon right at the bottom of the page that it's first written on. I even put in the first time I mentioned the word fire, it's defined in the footnote of my document at the bottom of the page. So somewhere down the road, if I've got my report in front of me during a deposition and opposing counsel asks me about a particular term or something, I've got that definition right in front of me. We talked about a complete and thorough investigation. That's a subjective characterization that will never get you very far. Here are some more terms or subjective characterizations you should avoid, like detailed measurements, or calling someone's investigation grossly inadequate, or saying that your investigation was a lengthy, careful, and objective. These are all subjective characterizations that really do you no good. You need to be objective when stating your opinions. Use pinpoint citations. If you're going to use some research to bolster your opinion, make sure it's the most current research and not something decades ago. Your report should have all the opinions you would expect to testify, and use the facts, the evidence, and the research which forms the basis for those opinions. So let me show you a few more things here. Bill, are we still doing good?
Yeah, you're doing great. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to show you a few things here, some tools. And like I said, up until today, the shortest presentation I've ever done on report writing is 4 hours. So I know I really got through this a lot, but I want to show you some tools and technology out there that would help you as well. Let's see here. Let's start with the websites. All right, this is Grammarly.com. The process that we go through here in our company. Once the report is written, I give it a cursory once over. Then I upload it to Grammarly and send it through the paces on Grammarly. Once that's done, I then send the report on to my administrative people who review it for grammar or punctuation and give it the once over as well. But more importantly, my administrative people don't know a darn thing about fire investigations. And if they read it and can't understand it because of jargon or it doesn't make sense to them, or what do they mean when a fire investigator says this, I know it's not written proper or well enough. So then we will change it again. And then finally it goes through a technical review with me again. So there are at least 4 steps after the investigator writes the report of review and technical review before it goes out the door to the client. And it's critical that you have these types of technical reviews when you produce your reports, especially a Rule 26 report. This is another good site. This is called citationmachine.net. And you could have a style manual at your desk that when you have to cite Kirk's fire investigations or a piece of research in Kirk's or Vito's book to bolster your opinion, those might be easy to create those citations. But if you come to citationmachine.net, it will show you how to source a website, a book, a journal, or a whole list of other different types of resources. For instance, if you need to properly cite using APA format, if you need to cite a newspaper, an online video, or perhaps a webinar, information you heard from there, or from an advertisement, if you have a piece of evidence, or if you have some facts or data that came out of the Sunday morning cartoons, I hope you never have to cite a cartoon for your report, but this will show you how to do it. Or a conference, a court case. I would probably stay away from citing court cases. That's way out of your sandbox. Perhaps a dissertation or an email. If you got an email from the subject during the course of your investigation, and do you know how to properly cite that using the APA format? An interview, a lecture, a manuscript. You can go down this whole list, but you choose any one of those, and it'll create the citation for you. In this particular case, you could enter in, if you just know the ISBN number, or you just know that it's Kirk's Fire, you can just type in Kirk's Fire and find which one you were speaking about. And perhaps it's a forensic fire scene reconstruction, or was it Kirk's fire investigation from Pearson 2018? That's the one you want to cite. It brings it up, and you just fill in the blanks, and it'll create the citation for you. Then you just copy and paste it into the bottom of the book. Simple as that. There's another website here, Active Words. All I will tell you about that is it's a little piece of software that I've been using for years. One of the nice things about it, if anyone wants to try it, the free 60-day trial is completely functional. Everything you can do with Active Words is available there on the free trial. And if I bring this up, I will show you quickly what that means. So I have in my Active Words approximately 260 NFPA 921 definitions properly cited in the APA format. So I told you earlier that when I first mentioned the word fire in my report, all I have to do is go down into the footnote and type the word fire and do double tap, and it'll put in the definition for me and put in the proper citation from the NFPA 921, page 14, 3.3.66. If I were to type in the word incendiary and double tap, it's going to put the definition of incendiary in there. If I was to type in the word arson and double tap, it's going to put the definition of arson in there for me, all properly cited to the current edition of NFPA 921. It's just that simple. There's 242 definitions out of 921, I believe I have, and there's a secret word for each one of them. And just like a dictionary, that secret word is the word you're talking about. So for instance, combustible. So if we type the word combustible and I double tap the space bar, it gives me three options. Am I talking about the combustible definition, a combustible gas detector, or combustible liquid? I choose that one and it puts it in there for me. You don't have to keep those definitions written somewhere and copy and paste. That particular small piece of software has saved me, over the course of its use, hundreds of hours of copying and pasting and things of that nature. It does a host of other things too, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to show you a few more things here. This is a investigation from the Chemical Safety Board. The only reason I show you this is for the cover sheet. It may look familiar to you, but as you go through it, you'll see the contents, the table of contents. You'll see some other ways they've got it laid out here, key findings. Just go through that and see how it's laid out and see if there's anything that fits your eye. This is one of our investigation reports. Looks very similar to the cover sheet of the Chemical Safety Board. That's because I stole the idea from them. And this is what we use for the cover sheet for our reports. There's our table of contents and the layout of our reports with the caption-based heading. I have some boilerplate in there about the standard of care in fire investigations that talks about the scientific method. There's the events. I believe in here somewhere we have, as I spoke about earlier, here's my investigative considerations right here. This is a section I talked about that articulates in a different way the scientific method. These are the other things that we considered as a cause for this explosion and fire, and this is how we were able to eliminate them. Other subject matter experts that I used in the investigation, and here's a rehash of my opinions and the basis for those opinions in those reports. PDFs there's some very cool things you can do with PDFs. I told you, here's another report that's out there on the internet. Again, quite honestly, I haven't read the whole thing. I'm not too interested in the content as much as I am as how it's laid out. This is the ghost ship fire in Oakland that occurred a little less than 4 years ago. But just go through it and look how it's laid out. Look at some of the things and how they've put them in there. I would have probably a little more splash of color, but there's some things in here that I like about how they put it all together. Here you got some pictures that are very, very helpful, just to give you some more ideas. As I told you earlier, a lot of our reports, oops, I'm sorry, that's not the one I want to show you. A lot of our reports do not warrant a Rule 26 report. The vast majorities are what are called summary of our findings. I send them a cover letter that basically says this is not for litigation purposes. However, if you want one that is compliant with Rule 26, I'll be happy to write one up for you at additional cost. But this is our summary of findings. That cover page should look familiar. And here's what I was talking about. My clients and the people that read my reports can read this summation right here and may not have to go any further. Some of them are visual learners. So what I've done is I've created two different columns here. They can read the text here on the right, or they can just read some of the text that I've pulled out with some accompanying pictures, and they could learn the same thing. This fire was intentionally ignited. Some more pictures here on the left, more text if you want to read it. And then I usually wrap up with maybe a half a dozen pictures on this side that sort of lays it out. So there's a host of ways they can read. They can go to the last page if they're visual learners, and they can just look at the text or look at the pictures and the captions. They can read the text, or they can just go down the margin here on the left, look at the small pictures with the text drawn out, or they can just read the summation. PDFs and technology in the future as it goes. I'll just show you this real quick. This is a rebuttal report that I wrote for the courts. We had to submit it electronically, and because I could submit it electronically, we submitted it to the courts and to the opposing side with audio embedded. This had to do with smoke detectors and 911 calls and timelines and stuff like that. And if you turn your audio down a little bit, I'll click on this button. You can hear the 911 call of this woman who ultimately suffered some very grave third-degree burns as she's calling 911 to report a balcony. Her balcony's on fire. So if you turn your sound down a little bit, because I think it's a bit loud. The other side settled. They dropped their case shortly after this. Unfortunately, the gentleman that owned this condo died from cancer before the resolution of this thing, and sadly, he died thinking he was responsible for this woman's injuries when he absolutely was not. The last thing I'll show you here is your investigative notebook. This was another fatal incident. This notebook contains 485 pages of documents. As you know, in any large investigation, your data and documents don't come in any type of order, chronologically or alphabetically or anything. But I have a piece of equipment. I have a desktop scanner that takes documents and scans them into searchable PDFs. And every time I've got a document in this particular case, I scanned it and attached it to the end of this particular case notebook. And over the course of the investigation, it grew to 485 pages. But I didn't have to worry about putting them in proper order, because all I needed to do is create bookmarks and put them all together. For instance, all of my personal documents, like our notes, are right here. NFPA 10, which dealt with fire extinguishers, was right here. These are all the reports from the public agencies. This is the building inspections from the fire department. These are all of the investigators on the fire and police side that filed reports on this fatal fire. And all I did is I alphabetized them. For instance, right here, the section on fire investigation or fire extinguishers on page 111 of 485. Well, it's scattered all over the place. Hunter Hackbarth here was the lead investigator. His investigation documents that I got are page 60 of 485. But I don't have to physically move these pages around. I just have to set up my bookmarks and my table of contents in a way so that I could find them right away. My scene documents, the sign-in sheets for our joint scene exam was right here. The lab exam, all of that evidence was there. And then we had to do a lot of research, because a lot of the stuff, one of the arguments that was starting to arise was that the smoke detectors didn't work. So I collected all of the research I could find on soot agglomeration, on acoustical soot agglomeration on smoke detectors. And we had all of those ready. We even got some people in for the lab exam who were familiar with that. We examined the smoke detectors and were able to show that they in fact did operate. So those are some of the things that are available out there to all of us as investigators to polish our reports and to reflect the quality that we want it to. I believe I have showed them everything, Bill.
I'm just
It
looking
looks
for
like
any.
we're right on time.
Yeah, perfect. If anyone has any questions, post them in the chat over here to the right. Someone had mentioned that Microsoft 365 Word also has a program that's similar to Grammarly as well.
Yep.
He's asking what software are you using for Notebook? I think that's the Nuance Power PDF standard. Is that right?
Yeah, my PDF software is Nuance Power PDF standard. Yes, it's much less expensive. I think it's still under $100, and when you can compare that to Adobe Acrobat, it's well worth it. I mean, it's not too far. I mean, you've already seen the report where I've embedded audio. I mean, it can be done now. You can embed video if you needed to in your reports and save them electronically.
I've posted a link to the test in the chat. You can either
Okay.
copy it and you can put it into your browser. If there are any other questions.
One of the things excuse me here a second while there's another little add-in, and I know it works with Chrome. That's the browser I use. But let's say we went to say you're reading a particular website, and I'm not one to say that I'm any type of language master, but one of the little links or one of the little add-ins for a website, for instance, I think I know what's going on here. Hold on. There we go. They're talking. But here's something I'll use. For instance, if I'm reading something and I don't know what harrowing means, I can double click on it. And with this little add-in in my website, when you double click on a word, it brings up a definition. You can do the same thing. I think Word has some things you can do as well. But when you're reading documents online and things like that, just these little things so you don't have to go looking for a dictionary or copy and paste it into a dictionary. There's a lot of little tools out there that can really streamline your report writing process. Active Words for 60 days of free use. If you guys want to try it, if you send me an email, I can attach all the NFPA 921 definitions to it. When you get my reply back in an email, you double click on the attachment and it'll automatically load them up into your Active Words. And I guarantee at the end of the 60 days, you'll pay I think it's $49 for the piece of software, just for those definitions that have those. Now, of course, when the new 921 comes out, you may have to update those definitions, but you'll still have them.
If any of the state fire marshals are on and you can see the chat, if you could answer that retention question on reports. And also there's a question here about the security of Grammarly. Any chance that the report could end up somewhere else using Grammarly?
When I drag my reports into Grammarly, it scans it, it does its grammar check, and then I download it back onto my computer, and then you can delete the file there on your account in Grammarly. So it's once it goes through my Grammarly check, I download it and then I delete it off of my account in Grammarly.
Thanks. I'm going to keep it open, but I'm going to go ahead and end the recording right now. Okay. So stand by. Thank you so much, Bob, for doing this presentation. You'll be able to see a link that'll get you Bob's contact information, and then there'll also be a link for you to take the test as well.